And I will speak fairly quickly, A, to keep you from going to sleep, B, because Amber has promised to throw a corn dog at me if I butt into her time. So, we're good? Okay. Oh. Pretty much that is a highlight of my world when it works. Although I'm not normally, am I supposed to stand here and be on the camera? Yes. Wow, that is interesting. Someone take a picture of that if you have a chance. Okay, so we are going to do 82 years of history in half an hour. I will talk fairly quickly. Let's see. No, yeah, oh good. You can't really see it, but they don't always let me have the laser because of something that happened 3 years ago. But today we have the laser pointer. So we are, and I'll talk about family business and also give you a flavor for our business and what we do and what it's like being us. I actually have a talk I give a lot called Selling as David or World of Goliaths because this is what I feel like every day when I go to work. And I am the little dude in the red shorts. We're just fighting multi-billion-dollar conglomerates in our world quite a bit. And of course, there's the beast who will not be named. So anybody in this room know what chow chow relish is? Raise your hand. See, that's actually a pretty large percentage. My theory is people who eat chow chow right before they die, they tell their kids what it is, because the sales just go like that. They don't go up or down, they're just going to do this. And here's a jar of our current branding. It's a Southern relish. And our company is very evolutionary. When I was a kid, that's all we made. It's like all the time. And now my cousin James runs production. He runs that product 4 hours a month. Then he's done. That's all we need of it. So I don't like a lot of pithy sayings. It's way less than 1% of our sales now. But evolve or die is a big comment. And Amber's going to talk about the creativity. She looks at what do people want tomorrow, and that's always been my job is, what are we going to do tomorrow that I can sell to Joe every person, in Walmart, as opposed to just a boutique gourmet aspect. So it's very interesting. I will say, those of you who are old enough remember there was a Purina cat chow commercial, and they said chow, 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 and that became my name in grade school, which I'm not thrilled about. I'm going to go back to, I want to show you this slide first. My granddad in the 30s. I don't know if anybody's been up North Main lately. They're nicely renovating the Vintage Company building, and that's his Vintage Company truck. That's where he worked in the 30s. And we think that's my grandmother's shadow because we couldn't afford a corporate photographer for sure. And notice it's a dirt road. He's got a coat, a tie, a hat. It's probably August, sweating to death. And he would drive around distributing to grocery stores products like garlic cloves, flavored vinegar, that sort of thing. And they had all kinds of stories about the old days when they started our company. He did that through the 30s, made it through the Depression, and then said, what'd be fun? Let's start our own company. And from the house, from 1940 to 52, they did the same things with their own brands, started putting their brand on things. And they would tell me stories like in the early days, my grandfather got really sick, and my grandmother had to make the deliveries. It was really cold, and the heater broke, and she had to make a certain amount of sales to get enough cash to buy gloves. And then my dad went to TCU in the 50s, and my uncle, I think it was free back then, because they had no money whatsoever. They lived at home, they worked for free, and my dad's job was to clean the syrup kettle. They used to make syrup, and I always tell people no maple trees were harmed whatsoever. And he had to imagine cleaning your breakfast plate with syrup in the morning when you have no hot water. They couldn't afford a hot water heater, so he would clean like a 60-gallon syrup kettle with cold water and then go off to class at TCU. So I don't think he had a lot of dates either. We want to back up here. So we covered, founded in 1940, evolutionary development. I go to New York trade shows, San Francisco, wherever, and we have all these salsas like we have on the table up there, and people say, aren't these your grandmother's recipes? And I always say, no, but wouldn't that be cool? Nobody ate Chipotle in 1940, 50, 60, 70. You have to constantly change. I used to think there'd be a point where you could work really hard, get to a point, and then just rest and relax, and everything would be merry. And sadly, that's never going to happen because you'll get run over by a truck the minute you stop. So there are things we're doing now. We have craft beer salsa that we combine with RAR. It's brewed across the freeway from us. It's our number 8 item nationally. We have it in the United Kingdom and Canada. And 15 years ago, if you'd said craft beer salsa, they would have just locked me up because that was just an idiotic concept. So you can't know what's coming. You just have to keep looking around. And I promise I won't give you a lot of pithy sayings, but the only constant is change is one of the ones I use a lot. And then current status, I like to tell you, I weirdly, CPAs get credit for listening to me for continuing education occasionally, and I have a slide that's how does a finance weenie turn into a food person who gets paid literally to play with food. So as was referenced earlier, every summer since 6th grade, I did the nastiest jobs they had at the plant. They paid me like $5 a day cash. I was illegal, so I couldn't complain. I was very excited when I turned 16 and got minimum wage. And we watched that go up. And it's a great way to learn the business. You know, when you personally have been on every machine, even though the versions they have now are beyond me, you know, I'm familiar though with putting bottles in the boxes because I've done that. I put the labels on. And in college, I did have the world's most interesting smelling Subaru because I would mix, you know, I'd have garlic like in my hair here. I used to have hair up here, might be some cumin there. And, you know, as like my dad, I didn't date a lot in college because I had such a glamorous appearance with all the spice all over me. So I would go up to UNT for 8 o'clock, which you could do without a helicopter back then, drive 50 miles to the plant, mix spices, go home, homework, repeat. So as glamorous as that does sound, I got out of college early and did just a 180. I went to work for Ross Perot's company in Dallas, wearing a coat and tie every day. Really cool, smart people, you know, working 70 hours a week. They told me to get a master's, so I was going to SMU at night and on the weekend. My wife bought a cat, by the way, because I was never home. And great people, great education, but if you've worked in a giant corporation, after the great training, then the politics start to kick in, and it will just drain the soul right out of your body. So came back to the family business, and it was so refreshing. I could wear jeans, and everything I did was, there wasn't any political aspect. You know, when I was doing things to really make a difference and creating products. So I've been back 30 years. I wish it was fun to tell you, you know, and during the 30 years as it is to quickly just say now, out of 900 brands of salsa tracked in the country, we're number 7. If we doubled, we'd be number 7. So think about how big the big people are. But it's nice to be able to, we're the largest independent brand in the country. It's funny, you'll run into people that they're like, are you guys thinking about growing outside of Texas? Like, yeah, we've had 2 rows in Whole Foods in London for 10 years now. And we're in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but we just smile and take whatever we can because it's been such a good job. I mean, a good journey. We make about 100,000 jars a day now equivalent, and we'll talk about the different things we do. All 50 states, Canadian provinces, we are in different countries. It's funny, people think that they want to go on a trade show to Paris with us, and I'm like, you really don't. Because this is what a Parisian trade show looks like. We could be in Paris right now doing a trade show. There's no windows, it's dark. You're gonna probably, your feet hurt now, it's been 9 hours standing up, and all 50,000 people want to get on the same subway car and go back to the hotel. So you're welcome, you don't have to do that. That was just a free gift from me to you. And so these are some slides where we're gonna look at history and giving you a feel for the company. That's our facility. And actually, it's changed as of 4 or 5 months ago. You see, the laser's not real intense. Oh, yeah, there, that's good. So we own this street. We've owned it for about 3 years because we have this block and we have that city block over here. But we didn't know what to do with it. I started standing out in the street, a little sign that says, this is my street, get off of it. But now we've doubled, this warehouse has been doubled. And so we've closed this. There's nice trees planted there. And we have basically 2 city blocks. And when I was a kid, that little building right there, that was the entire factory. And I've been doing some research for Grins to see what it was. In the 20s, it was built as an ice cream cone factory. So 100 years ago, people were making ice cream cones there now. Neither Amber nor I will eat the gluten. So, you know, that worked out well that we started making salsa. And you can tell, what I like to show people is this is not a real nice neighborhood right there. I tell them 2 blocks that way is the hottest group of buildings in town, South Main, all the new restaurants, beer halls, wedding venues, so super cool, 2 blocks that way. And 2 blocks the other way, you can still buy crack. So we're on the edge of gentrification, I call it. But it's coming after us. So here's some family photos, just some commentary. Remember when people got dressed up and went downtown? That's my granddad in a coat and tie. They're just shopping downtown, as you do, in a full coat and tie. That's my dad and my uncle. I think that's about 1944 or so. My granddad, you'll see a theme in some of these older buildings. They had, if you've ever seen Sam Walton's office recreation, it's just tacky plywood. We have beautiful, now I actually sit where my grandparents did, which is really cool. It's just a freak thing. We peeled off the cheap plywood and there's gorgeous old bricks. So the only uncovered, unpainted brick of the original building is one of my walls in my office, which is awesome. But they had the tacky plywood, they had actual typewriters. He's in a coat and tie sitting there. working at what was, beyond a tiny business. It's itty bitty. I always say that we've grown from itty bitty to really small over the years. That was not their work vehicle, that was the vehicle. That's go to church, go to school. I used to say go to vacation, and my dad's like, yeah, we didn't do vacations. We couldn't afford that. And then in 75, we built the first, we're very organic. It's like a quilt over there. So this is my granddad talking to my dad and the builder. And on social media, pictures of my grandmother in an 18-wheeler get tremendous feedback. I don't know what that is, but if you ever want some social media traction, put an old lady and a big truck on there, and you'll get lots of likes. My dad and my uncle modeling the nice 70s suits, and my granddad helping. I'm pretty sure that was a photo op. I don't think he was loading trucks at that point, but it's cool. And then you had, I love this suit. My uncle passed away about 1.5 years ago, and he's in some of these, and I loved asking him if he still had that suit. But we would do things like this. I think it's a teachers convention, and they were trying to show them how to use our recipe in home ec classes. When you have relish as your #1 item, it's not pretty. I tell people, with relish, you go to the fridge, you open it up, and you're like, oh, chow chow. I'll put a tablespoon on my hot dog or my corn dog and my beans, and then it'll rotate back through the fridge over like a 9-month period, and it'll come back 9 months later or so, and you're like, oh, look, chow chow, and you use a tablespoon, rotate out the next 9 months, you're like, oh, look, it went out of code, and you throw it away. With salsa, they'll eat the whole jar or half the jar at a football party. It'll be gone by like 3 or 4 days. The velocity is so much better. I'm so happy we got into taco sauce in the 70s. And that's my dad, my grandmother, my uncle, and our one non-family employee in the office at that time. She worked for us for 42 years. Started when she was 18, retired not that long ago. And that's my aunt. She was a public school teacher for about 35 years, but when I say she grew up in the business, it's because they couldn't afford a babysitter, and there she was being babysat with the product. My uncle and I doing trade shows back when all we could afford was I made little signs with a printer that said hot, hotter, mild, whatever, and we paid somebody to paint a banner. You can see family photos there. Just giving you a feel for it really is third-gen family business, and there's a million stories, behind each one. This is my uncle passed, but I keep this picture up here. That's my dad. My dad's 85. We pay him to have lunch with us at least once a week. It's a hard gig, but you got to work half a century first. And we had that ad put in some magazines when my uncle passed away. That's my grandmother shopping downtown, as you do, just looking very glamorous. So that tagline, by the way, that there's a little grandma in every jar, not literally, gets a lot of feedback from Balcom. So I want to give you some commentary on how we've grown our little family business to become at least a major independent brand. We're not a threat. Remember that Pace Salsa is Campbell's Soup. Tostito is Frito-Lay Pepsi. These are big people. They have more lawyers than we have employees. So, but I'll do anything to increase sales. There's a couple of statements that are contradictory. I say you can't have an ego because you're going to get kicked in the head every day and told you're stupid and that your baby's ugly, and you have to be a massive narcissist. So if you can reconcile those two, you end up with stuff like this. That is me in a full-on Canadian Mountie costume. I rented that off university, flew that sucker to Canada, and wore it for 2 full days. And that's a wool we don't have in Texas. I was sweating all day, sweat rolling down my back. There's 42 individual gold buttons you can't see behind the apron that I had to do every morning in the hotel. I'm like 22, 23, 24, I'm gonna be late. And that hat is one size fits all. There was a divot in my head for the whole 2 days. I looked stupid. And you know what? We sold more in Canada than we ever had. They would grab every buyer who came in the door and say, you got to check out the moron from Texas dressed like a Mountie. And I'm fine with that. If it'll sell another jar, I won Vendor of the Year. I got to be up there with a little trophy. And again, it's never about me. I'll show you. It looks like it's about me, but it's really, I tricked you into buying more salsa. And when I came back, we were selling 10,000 jars a year in Canada. Now we're selling just under 500,000. That's taken 30 years. I flew up there with my sales director many times to be told, no, 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 no. Actually, they would say, what is salsa? What would I do with it? Why did you put peaches in it? No. I had a lot of that. And then on the next photo, people get confused pretty commonly. I'm on the right. So I don't like hokey things, but we started using Miss Texas for some promotions because we found that a buyer a buyer who looks like me from Wisconsin in his 50s not going to be nice to me necessarily, but you say, would you like Miss Texas to sign an autograph for your granddaughter? Suddenly they're all soft and warm and happy. And then of course we can use photos to blackmail them later. So you got to be very creative when you have no money. You got to pivot. And what we found is that, and interestingly, Chevrolet was sponsoring Miss Texas photos. And they come to us after a couple of years and they're like, Chevrolet dropped it, do Ms. Renfro's want to sponsor it? And it's an example of don't ever prejudge. In my head, I'm thinking you're clearly insane because Chevrolet and Renfro don't go in the same sentence, advertising budget-wise. But instead, I asked how much it would be. It was like $700 incrementally more than we were spending per year anyway to have her at a couple of events. It was literally a no-brainer. And for the next 7 years, every photo, and keep in mind Miss Texas's at the time would do 300 public events a year, handing out photos to little future salsa buyers. And every photo had our logo and a picture of our 4 jars. And we almost missed that opportunity had I been too cocky and turned it down. And again, an example of doing anything, I did demos in Canada. I made both my cousins do it later because it's so delightful, standing there looking like an idiot, letting people tell you how they don't like the product. But they said, be sure and wear your cowboy boot and your cowboy hat. I didn't have either of those. They think we all ride horses to work. So I bought this stuff, flew to Canada to look like a Texan. Yes, they had no idea. By the way, the chips above my head there, those are really good. They're all made in Las Colinas. Please buy the Social chips too. And also, we're not a big enough company to do guerrilla marketing, so we do orangutan marketing. And we'll do things like, we will ship product to movie and TV sets. They can pay the star $1 million an episode, but they can't buy their own groceries. So they will come to people like us. And I know what's probably going to happen is I'm going to be feeding the crew, and that's fine. If we get another consumer, we're thrilled. So if they want 5 jars, we'll send 50. If they want 50, we'll send 500. And we know 99% of the time, nothing else is going to happen. But you get lucky occasionally. So somebody called from a show called Pretty Little Liars. I went home and my teenage daughter told me it was an actual show. And as I'm filling out the address, I realized it said Warner Brothers. And at the time, I said, the only thing I watch on television is Big Bang Theory. And the person replied, well, that set decorator is a friend of mine. Send extra, I'll give it to him. And another life lesson here, they never tell you, by the way. Nobody tells you when you're going to be, what time you're on television, if you're in an article, whatever. I happen to be sitting on the couch with my wife and daughter 8 months later, and there's some high-tech graphics coming up here. You see that? That took me like an hour, so please appreciate that. That is a jar of our tequila salsa. So that day, it was a product I conceived of and developed on my favorite show. It was there for 3 episodes, then it went to the island for 2. So 5 shows in a row it's there. That show's in syndication. My grandchildren will be pointing to that, telling their friends about it. Had you killed me that day, I wouldn't have not complained too much. I have found other things to live for. Please do not shoot me. And then also, I'm on salary. I don't cost the company any extra if I'm working on the weekend. So I'll sit there and do weird things. And I will post a funny comment. And Twitter, back now Twitter's really for Lady Gaga, but there was a time when little people like us could use it. And one night I made a joke about a flight that landed on the wrong place, and I went to bed. I wake up the next morning, somebody has screenshot me. The Today Show was looking for such a joke, found it, I don't know how, and had it on national television for 30 seconds. That's like $50,000 of value. And notice, I don't put my little bald face in there. Nobody cares. I put a jar of our salsa. Now, that's the old branding. It's a little fuzzy, but on television, it showed up beautifully that it was our ghost pepper salsa. And United they landed on the wrong Pacific Island, and I made a joke about the Chicago airport. The important thing is it was free. I've Googled myself and found Doug Renfro in Alaska and won a beard growing contest. So we reached out and said, do you mind if we play with this? And I showed my little Eurotrash beard here and his giant beard and said he barely beat me. And we sent him a bunch of, salsa, hat, mug, everything we could think of. Just using social media now is a great leveler of the playing field for us little people. And okay, one more pithy saying. When you're at a family business, you have to say change is not an indictment of the past. When you tell the next generation, or the past generation, you want to change something, what they hear is, so you're saying I'm an idiot. Like, no, things changed. This was actually the fancier version that I got us to do a little bit after I'd been back. It looked like my grandmother whipped up in the station wagon in the 50s, which is what we wanted it to look like when we came out with that label in the 50s. The problem is it was 1992. And we were literally getting buyers from Chicago saying, great product, great family, great pricing, great programs. We're not going to carry your product because that's just the ugliest label I've ever seen. I'd tell my uncle and he'd say, no, that's what we do. That's how it is. And the buyer told me not to change it. Well, we did. I don't recommend this, but we're a small company, so we couldn't afford consultants, focus groups. We just did something we thought seemed like a good idea. I got some help from Warren Douglas here in the city, and violent repackaging, I call it. We did a custom jar, custom lid, totally different label, and prayed to God people knew it was us. Look at that. We went to a trade show, and we all thought we were going to die. It's like nobody's ever going to find our jars again, and we're all going to have to go work, somewhere fast food. And it worked. Big sales increase. Buyers would come up to us at trade show and tell my white-haired uncle, thank God you changed the label. And he would say, you told me to never change it. And they said, well, we didn't want to hurt your feelings. And that taught me another lesson. If your name is on the package or the company, don't try to get input. Get it through your salesperson who has a different last name, or a stranger you sneak in there, because you don't get honest input necessarily if they think that you're the owner or one of the owners. And that got a little boring. See the plain background? After about 7 years, we did what I call the Jerry Garcia tie-dyed chromatic shift. And it's just see the little wavy colors in there? That little change made like a 10% pop in sales. It's crazy what people react to. And then we got lazy, and many years later, we switched to a local agency, Balcom, which I call 25-year-olds, or a room full of millennials, which is what we needed, because my cousins and I are all getting older and we don't know how to speak to the younger generation. And so they came up with another violent repackaging, which you have with you now. And you'll notice some of the focus was, I need people to be able to read the brand. They're not going to when you're on your cart, you're like 5 feet from the aisle. You're not going to run over there and stick your face against the jar to read it. I need you to be able to read it. And I didn't want to win an art contest. I wanted them to see what it was. And we put that's a peach, and it's got a big font. That's been nice, but I will tell you something else. When you change a label, there are people who think you changed the recipe, and we got hate mail. My favorite one was the third generation probably changed the recipe, made it cheaper to make more money. You greedy blanks. Your grandmother is probably embarrassed in heaven. We literally didn't change the recipe at all. But I don't know, we get about 50 of those letters. That was delightful. So use what you have. In our case, we have grandma on the label. I'll have people pop up at a booth that don't realize that, and they'll jokingly be like, where's Ms. Renfro? And I'll say, well, she was my grandmother. She passed away in 1991, and they get real quiet and sorry, and I will take the pity sale every time. You just said she would have appreciated that. She was very aggressive. And of course, perseverance, stubbornness, and tenacity. You can't be a moron in business, but I think these three are way more important than being smart, because you're going to be told routinely that you're stupid and your ideas are bad. We had a Northeast distributor 7 years in a row, twice a year. I would get to go put on pretty clothes, fly somewhere so that they could tell me, no, we're not carrying your brand, and sort of dismissively, snort through their nose, rolling their eyes, no. And now they're a six-figure client, and I know where the people are who said no. One day I got one of their resumes, and I took great pleasure in lighting a little candle and shredding that resume. I did not tell them because that would be rude. I just had a little private ceremony. Always take the high road. And then, of course, tequila. So, we're fortunate to be in an industry that has a lot of combinations to that. And even internally, my first two items I got to create were habanero and black bean salsa, because what was happening is we were going to buyers and they would give us a sign across and run screaming the other direction because they didn't want any more salsa. And I said, we've got to do something, because I have 3 children who are starving to death. And what they didn't have was a habanero, which at that time was wild, crazy, sexy, exotic. Now, you see it at McDonald's and the ketchup. But we would say what you don't have is a variety salsa that's not $10.99. I'm not talking about Williams-Sonoma, you're going to give it to somebody as a housewarming gift. I'm talking about you're going to use this every week. And they went for it. But I was told internally the habanero will be cute to have, but it will obviously never sell much because it's so hot. It's been our #1 item for 15 years. So and don't get me wrong, I do a lot of stuff wrong. I make a lot of mistakes, and that's how you learn. You just do a lot of things and make a note, don't do that again. And of course, what we're all shooting for is a super fan who tattoos my grandmother onto his arm. I thought this was a joke, and again, I didn't know them from Adam. Somebody sent it to me, I thought it must be henna. I'm like, no, it's real. And now we're good friends. Sam Anderson plays in a local band. He's very prominent. He's out there. They've done European tours. And he likes to tattoo prominent, iconic brands locally on his body. So that says Ms. Renfro's guiding me everywhere I go. And Now we're friends, but at the time I literally didn't know him. At Best Made Pickles, by the way, they've got like 100 people who've tattooed that little smiley girl on their arm, but grandmother's different. So after, I always put that's the best part, but that's after Amber fascinates you with the corn dog legacy, and I appreciate you not throwing anything at me.
It is State Fair time, so I like to tell people that my brain is more fried than the State Fair right now because I have so much going on. But I really appreciate y'all's interest in the brand, so I'm excited to talk about it. A lot of similarities with Mrs. Renfro's and Doug. I think we both have some corny jokes. He's definitely very funny. It's my second time to hear him speak, and I'm always entertained. So this is our current logo for Fletcher's Corny Dogs. It has definitely changed over 80 years, but this is what we're currently using. Fletcher's was started by my grandfather, Neil Fletcher, and his brother, Carl. And before they went into the food industry, they were performers in vaudeville. They were actually 4th and 5th generation performers that traveled the U.S. They even traveled into the U.K. in the late 1800s, early 1900s, traveling. My grandfather was the producer and director and also acted in what they called the Madcap Players. So Neil Fletcher, and I'll refer to him more than Carl, I don't know too much about Carl. He wasn't talked about too much in my years, so I truly just don't know. But Neil was always more at the face of the company and at the family. So I'm going to talk more about Neil. He was born in 1904. He was the youngest of 8 children. His father actually passed away when he was just 4 years old. And so Neil began working at 5 years old in 1909, singing and playing the ukulele in bars and saloons, and some of the papers say brothels. I just usually leave that out. And he was born in Davenport, Nebraska, and he made his way to Missouri in the 20s, and then eventually their Madcap Players, their company, moved to Dallas in the 30s. He met his wife, Minnie Minerva Baker, and married her in the 30s. And so here we have just a couple little playbills. So we have this one called The Drunkard. This is actually from 1937 or 1938, and most likely I'm guessing this was at the State Fair of Texas, because that is how they got into the State Fair of Texas. Was Neil and Carl and his wife and family, they were in a show called The Drunkard, and they were approached by State Fair officials in 1938, and they were offered an opportunity to have a food booth. And being towards more the end of vaudeville, my granddad used to say that he helped kill vaudeville because they were so bad. And obviously they were playing in shows called Drunkard, which they were just natural acts at. But they got an opportunity for a food booth. We actually have this second playbill over here, which is actually at Fort Worth. I'm not exactly sure. It didn't have a date on it, unfortunately. 20s, 30s, 40s, they kept things, but they weren't dating them. This picture here, that's my grandmother, Minnie. And it is her father and uncle. Her family was all performers as well. And this is just such a great shot. I'm not sure the context, but I think that she's probably in an unfortunate situation. The one on the far, you can see the photo, and that is actually Neil Fletcher. This is probably the youngest photo that we have of him. Unfortunately, every photo that most people see of him, he looks to be about 90 years old, because we just don't have any younger photos of him. Someone said there was a fire, and so we're just going to go with that. But so I love to talk about just vaudeville beginnings. People always ask, what can we, owe the success to Fletcher's brand? Is it the tradition? Is it the product itself? I think a lot of it is that it's from their showmanship. They were natural-born performers. I used to say they could sell snake oil. So I can just imagine when they started in 1942, calling people in, putting on a show, and just being part of what the world looked like in the 40s. Another great thing about our brand that I just love to mention to people is that, this started in the late 30s. So you have to think about what was going on. You have the Depression, the world is about to go to the Second World War. And at the end of what they knew and what they did for so many generations was performing, they took a chance on a product that no one had ever heard of before and introduced it at the State Fair of Texas in 1942. So I've got a few photos here. The top left one, it is probably the earliest photo that we have, and unfortunately I don't know the photo credit because it was in the 40s. And we have the Fletcher's Corny Dogs, and it says Canine. So Fletcher's actually went through several name changes in the beginning, trying to come up with where they kind of fit. They went through Hot Dog on a Stick, they went through Brown Bomber, Canine Corny Dogs was one. I don't think people really responded well to Canine. And eventually they just said, well, let's just use our name, Fletcher's Corny Dogs. The photo in the middle, you can see, I wish I had Doug's laser pointer. Not the man standing holding the corny dog, but the man to the right. So that's my grandfather, Neil, and his wife, Minnie, is next to him. And if you can see on the tree, there's Mr. Corny, and so that's one of his first appearances. Where my face is, I am blocking a photo. It's just a photo of ladies eating corny dogs. And again, I'm not sure exactly the date on this. I'm just assuming it's in the 50s. That's my grandfather in the center of the ladies. I mean, look how happy he looks. I mean, the women are dressed so beautifully. They have corny dogs, and he was just such a natural showman, and he was a people person. And just like me and just like my dad, my grandfather, this job makes us so happy because we seem to make people happy with a product. This gentleman here, he was actually, he worked for the company for a long time, and actually his son worked for the company, and then his son worked for the company as well. So one thing about Fletcher's is that we're not only a family company that has generations of children, we also have employees that have worked for us for generations. Which I love even more is that our customers are generations of families that come out. So it's this really fun tradition we get to share with our customers. Let's see. This photo is my dad's cousin Buster. This photo was actually used in commercials and was used to advertise. So Neil Fletcher started the Corny Dog in 1942, gave them away for 15 cents each. I believe they sold about 50,000 in that 17 days at the state fair. But during the 40s and 50s, my grandfather still did a little bit of performing. He actually managed the Majestic Theater in Dallas. He still did some acting and performing until his end. It just wasn't his full-time job when he was directing the Madcap Players. But when he was managing one of the theaters in Dallas, they actually had their corny dogs that they would sell out of that theater as well, and this was one of the advertisements for that. The bottom middle photo is Neil Fletcher, as I call him Papa Neil. See, every photo, he looks about 90 years old. And so this is like such a perfect photo. This is what he looked like. He had his Fletcher shirt on, always a mouthful of corny dogs, was never shy in front of a camera or a video. These photos kind of go between the 40s and about the 50s or 60s. So with these photos, so the top left photo, 1960 to 1963, Neil Fletcher Sr. did open a drive-in, and it was on Samuel Boulevard in Dallas. It lasted 3 years. I'm not sure exactly why it didn't go any longer than that. You know, there's no one for me to ask, but I just love this photo that just has the signage. And you can kind of see some of the stands over the years in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We've got Fletcher's State Fair Corny Dogs. We've got Fletcher's Corny Dogs. The one on the bottom middle, you can see that canine has still made its way into some of the signage. And throughout this, Neil Sr. was still acting. We have his, it is one of his talent cards from, how does she move this? You can minimize it. Okay. I believe it's Peggy Dawson Talent Agency. But so these are some photos. Again, he looks about 90 years old, but he was still acting, singing, performing. He did a lot of radio throughout this time. He did several TV, several movies like Creatures from the Deep, Mars Needs Women. is one, I think he was like the lieutenant in that. One of the more famous roles that he ever had, he was a bank teller in the Bonnie and Clyde movie with Faye Dunaway, and that's on the bottom right. So throughout his corny dog business, he still just loved and had a passion for acting and singing and talking. Did a lot of voiceover. So I mentioned that Neil married Minnie, and they had 3 children, which was my dad, Skip Fletcher, or Neil Jr. There's my uncle, Bill, and then he had another son, John. John was really not ever involved in the company business. Neil and Bill were more involved. I do want to talk about my dad a little bit. He ran the company from the mid-'80s until his passing in 2017, and while he was 82, he definitely had a life. I mean, he probably lived 5 different lives in his 82 years. He was born in 1934, and he went to Woodrow Wilson. He is class of 53. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2009. This bottom photo on the left, you can see one of his performances on TV. He also just loved acting and singing. He did a lot of performing. He was drafted in the Army, where he didn't go and fight, he went and sang. He started out also as a crop duster and then ended up going into commercial piloting, and he flew for Frontier Airlines until he retired. The top photo, he also was a writer and a fishing guide for Lake Tawakoni, which he did for several years. He loved fishing, hunting, all of that. He was about 53 when he took over his role in Fletcher's, and so he had about 50 years of just the most amazing story. He was a farmer at one point. He managed some nightclubs in Dallas. He sang at Jack Ruby's club, and he also sang on the Arthur Godfrey show. And then he ended up becoming saved and gave his life to Christ. And so then he became a more gospel singer, and he actually traveled the country singing at churches that he was invited to. The top right is actually an article that Frontier highlighted him. The bottom photo on the right is the whole family. So it's Neil Sr., his wife, and then his 3 boys. So he had a very full life. He did a lot of things. At 53 is when he took over more of the reins of the company with his brother. I included the photo of them fishing because you will often find articles where my dad, Skip, and Neil Sr., when they asked why they don't do more, why they don't grow the company, they said they just wanted more time to go fishing. And if they grew the business, they would have less time fishing and less time being outdoors. So it's very important that people knew that they liked fishing. So kind of moving into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the stands changed. We're still at the State Fair of Texas at this time. We went from having 1 stand to about 5 stands in the 70s. You can kind of see how things changed a little bit. The photo on the bottom left, you can see that corny dogs were 80 cents, which this is our 80th anniversary, and they're now $7. But we've got the top photo in the middle, which is the inventor, Neil Sr., and you've got his 2 sons on the left and his 2 grandsons on the right. Everyone except the man on the very left have passed away now, but it was definitely this generation of men, boys at the state fair, just having a great time, selling the product. Then you have this middle photo, which is kind of bringing in the 3rd generation, the 3 children. That is my cousin William, myself, and my brother Aaron. We are the current owners of Fletcher's Corny Dogs. We were all born in the 80s. And so while I've spent half of the company's time alive, I've been in it for 35 years. I don't know all the stories, but I definitely try to let you know as much as I've learned. One of my favorite photos is this photo on the right. Look how much it's changed. That is our big tech stand that most people will go to. I'm not sure about the decor, but we've certainly improved things since then. So again, being more in the 80s, and my dad and my uncle have taken over more of the business. My granddad did the State Fair of Texas. He was in the movie theaters, had a diner, but he really didn't do much. He just wanted to sing and dance and act, and he still loved it. And when my father and my uncle took over, they saw a real opportunity on their hands to grow the business that people just really seemed to love and they wanted. They would tell them, you can't starve us between fairs. So as you can see in the top right photo, this was a grand opening for one of their kiosks. They began to open kiosks in some of the malls such as Galleria, North Park, Collin Creek, and then they had a lot of standalones as well. And this photo is probably early 80s. You've got my mother, Gigi Fletcher, my dad, uncle, family. So here's Neil Sr. that looks about 90. There's my dad, my mother, creepy clown, my uncle and his wife, my cousin, and then I got my 2 brothers in the back that have passed away. But this was when they started going into the kiosks. In 1988, my grandfather passed away. We actually have a Senate resolution naming him the inventor of the corny dog and just recognizing what he did. The photo in the middle is my father and my grandfather, and this was one of the last photos of them. One thing I love about this photo is people tell us all the time, your corny dogs aren't as big as they used to be. What did you change? If you see here, they are still the same size. We have never done foot-long corny dogs. They've never been 10 inches or even 8. It has been the same corny dog all of this time. And then you've got my father, Skip Fletcher, in the very far right. So when he took over the business, he said if it's not, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is how he said it. And the recipe stayed the same. They did start to introduce some more variety of dogs in the early 2000s, but really the same method that his father started, he wanted to carry on. And it's something that the 3rd generation always carries on as well. We do everything the same way that my grandfather used to. We still have the same recipe for our corny dog mix. We still do everything as hand stuck. Even the way that we fry it in the same fryers, the way that we turn the corny dogs in the fryer. You can automate so much of this stuff, but we want to honor the past. And again, something about what he did works, so we're not going to change anything. So one thing that I just love about the business is, it's 80 years this year and we're on 3 generations. Every generation has got to have a little something different that they've done. The grandfather did the dine-in, my father and uncle and my mother did the franchises, they did the kiosk, they were in the malls, they did local events like the Byron Nelson. And then towards the late 90s and 2000s, when my brother and I came along in the late 80s, they really just kind of wanted to focus on family. And again, my dad would say, I just want to go fish and RV, gold prospecting, traveling.
Okay, I've got to reshare.
Okay. So the company did slow down quite a bit. Actually, in 1992, Fletcher's did have to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The franchises, they had over 50 in 3 different states between Oklahoma, Texas, and Arizona. My mother never really liked to talk about it too much. She said that with the economy, oil crisis in the early 90s and just growing too fast, there were just issues and they ended up closing it down. I do like to mention it just as other entrepreneurs are going into business to look at some of the things that our company has had over 80 years, to still be here today, to still be an iconic brand, having dealt with illnesses, deaths, lawsuits, other tragic situations. My father lost 2 of his sons well before their time, and we're still here and we're still going strong. So this is my father, Skip, and my uncle, Bill. They were the 2nd generation owners running crazy at the State Fair of Texas selling corny dogs. We've got the photo of one of the kiosks with the billboard. Now open, State Fair corny dogs. So this was one, and they had about 50 of these. You can see one of the grand openings in the bottom, and this is when we started introducing Mr. Corny more, and people just seem to love him. We've changed him a little bit now. He's a lot more friendly looking now. The photo next to that, you can see my dad standing in front of the stand. So by this time, I think we had about 6 locations at the State Fair of Texas. People think we only have 1, and it's always at Big Tex, and then there's always a line. We've been really trying to educate people that we do have 7 locations, and if you split the map down the middle, always go to the right, to the east. you're going to have better lines on that side. The Taste the Flavor of the Fair, free, this little corny dog, Mr. Corny Club. I can't read it, but it lists all of the locations that we had in Dallas, Fort Worth. If I walked over there, I could see it, but I'd leave the camera. So again, this was just part of the second generation adventure of just experimenting with the brand and the product and what people wanted. We really love to just do what our customers want. If they want it, who are we to say no? And they wanted corny dogs throughout the fair time. So they experimented with the franchises and the kiosks. So as my father passed away in 2017, I was 30 years old, and while I was raised in the business, he really mentored me, taught me everything that I know, mentored my brother. The State Fair of Texas was so incredibly important and special to us growing up. We actually went to private school when we were younger. It was very small, and they had something called paces, and you could do them from anywhere. And so pretty much for the fair time, our parents would pull us out of school and we would go work the State Fair of Texas. I remember being 10 years old, and my first job was putting the sticks in the corny dog, in the hot dog. Every corny dog is still hand stuck today. Again, these things can be automated, but instead we choose to stick 500,000 over 24 days. And so when my father passed, I was absolutely terrified. When you have such an amazing history, legacy, name, and my parents encouraged me to follow my passions, which led me to getting a degree in health science, and I don't know what I'm ever going to do with that. So now I am selling corny dogs or peddling corny dogs, but trying to also preach moderation with my degree. So it was a very scary time, just in that, what if you mess up? You have this huge legacy and company behind you, and while you were raised in the business, I wasn't my dad. I wasn't my uncle or my grandfather. And so, we just took it with, great care and caution. How can we honor those that came before us? How can we be more relevant and trendy while keeping it classic, being true to our customers, not changing the product that they love? We still use the exact same recipe for our corny dog mix. We do get a lot of people that will message us saying, they don't taste the same anymore. And understand that, depending on who makes the batter, who cooks them, it can change things. And so we're really adamant. Like she said, my job is quality control at the events, at the State Fair of Texas. I am constantly with my family going around making sure that the product is that item that you waited all year for, that you drove to the fair to have, that you paid for parking and paid for a product. I want to make sure that it is that nostalgic tradition memory that you have, and we want you to keep coming back year after year, and that's why we put so much effort into it. We do have a different hot dog, but we've had it for about 25 years. So when people say, again, it doesn't taste the same, I ask when they last had one, because it's been the same for 25 years. Our original jalapeno and cheese and our Texan, they're all from Syracuse Sausage, which is local to Ponder, Texas. That is one thing that the third generation has started pushing more, is new items. So we do have a turkey dog, we have an all beef, we have a cheesy, we also have the jalapeno and cheese that my dad introduced in 2004. And so you can kind of see the lineup here, and I always crack up because on the one on the very end, I get asked a lot if that's mold, and as the head of marketing, I would never post a picture of a corny dog that has mold on it. It is a jalapeno. It just is the photographer doing some kind of little, shading or something, but that's number one, don't post moldy products. And so, again, the photos just explain, we do ship nationwide on Goldbelly. This was one of my goals of reaching just a nationwide presence. So we shipped all 50 states. We've been on goldbelly.com for a year. It's just a website that ships iconic eats all over the U.S. We've shipped everywhere from California to New York. We have shipped several times to Hawaii. And so I told my mother, we need to investigate who these people are and go there and go to Hawaii and find out who's buying corny dogs and stay there for a while. On the bottom left, you see the catering van. And see, Mr. Corny's a lot more cute and friendly now. We really listened to our crying children customers, and we changed him to look a little bit more friendly. But one thing the third generation has done is we have expanded the business. We haven't opened any restaurants, but we do a lot of what you may be seeing the last couple of years, we bought food trucks in 2019. We do festivals and catering and events. We've catered everything from weddings to graduation parties, football parties, grand openings of businesses. The bottom right photo is actually from Thursday, celebrating the State Fair of Texas. And on the very right, you can see Emma Fletcher, who is a fourth generation. She's 18 and she has been working in the business since she was young. I don't have any children, so I am just going to hope that she will become the fourth generation whenever we're ready to hand that over. Very proud of her. She's actually going to SMU, and so we're all telling her, please get a business degree, because none of us did. So yeah, we're celebrating our 80th year at the State Fair of Texas, and so we like to tell people that, you know, we really love our customers, and we hear y'all that y'all want the same product you've had for a long time, and so we promise to keep the same recipe while expanding the type of dogs we do to fit all the needs, from religious needs or maybe vegetarian needs. And so we really want everyone to be able to have the tradition that is a Fletcher's Corny Dog at the State Fair of Texas. We also keep it one of the most reasonably priced items at the State Fair. All of our corny dogs are between $6 and $9. Most items you're going to see are $15 and more. And we just, again, we want it to be something everyone can have. Taking into consideration just all the things that we could do, we really want to be true to the brand and true to our customers. And so we really listen and appreciate y'all's feedback if there's something that you want to see us do. And you know, we're very active on social media. And so I think that's really about it. I really appreciate you guys loving our brand, and we hope that you love what we've been doing the last 5-7 years since we've increased performance around the community. And we just hope that you guys will stay corny with us.
Have you ever considered freezing them and putting them in stores?
So,
Can you repeat the question for the Zoomers?
oh, so she wants to know if Fletcher's has ever considered freezing them and putting them in stores. You know, we have thought about this a lot, but we still want it to be an item that is at live events, live festivals, something that is more exciting to go to. We would never want it to be something that just isn't in the spirit of what it was born in, which is at an event. But we do ship them frozen on Goldbelly. And so when we get your order on goldbelly.com, we fry them about 2-3 days before we ship them, flash freeze them, and then we ship them out. So that is one way to get them. I just need to learn how to be, you're so funny. I was like, man, he's got corny jokes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun to introduce more people to your products. Like every time somebody hears about Renfro, it makes them smile instead of throw something at me. They'll buy, the jar, same thing with the corn dogs.
Well, I would say Fletcher's also has fans that tattoo our mascot on their body. And so they kind of use it as a, do I get a free corny dog, though?
They get one.
Yeah, they get one per year. And you have to show it to me.
I have a question about the creation of a corny dog. How did the original generation, the founders, know that a corny dog, what a corny dog was, and that it would be popular?
Yeah, I'm so glad you also said that. I have said it probably 30 times in the last 4 days, and so the fact that I forgot today is kind of funny. But so in 1938, when he was offered the opportunity for a food booth, they really didn't know what to do. There was he said it was a Dutchman over on Oak Lawn that had a dish that he really liked. It was cornbread baked in kind of an ear of a corn mold with hot dog, and it was more of a baked dish. It was time consuming to make, sit down, knife and fork, eat it. And so he and his brother liked it, and they just kind of played with the batter, and they played with ideas on how they could transform this product that was similar but completely innovative in the fact that it was fried and it was on a stick. The stick is very important to the corny dog. You know, you can walk down the state fair consuming your yummy corny dog with mustard, and then by the time you're finished, you run into another stand. But it was inspired, but never seen before.
Okay, and we've got a question here. Does Fletcher's have a vegan corn dog?
So Fletcher's does not have a vegan corn dog. Our batter has milk and eggs in it, but we do have a vegetarian corny dog that is non-GMO soy and pea protein. It is available at all 7 locations at the State Fair of Texas and through our catering, through Gold Belly, and at our pop-ups. It'll be at Clyde Warren Park, which our permanent residency starts there after the State Fair of Texas. We'll be at Clyde Warren Park 6 days a week, and we'll have the vegetarian dog with us.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can't make
Any-
something up. Yes, sir.
You all talked a lot about, or touched a bit on social media and how that's been able to grow your brands over the past couple of years, especially with the millennial generation. Can you touch a little bit more about how it's done for you all and how you've utilized it specifically?
Can you kind of repeat his question?
So they're asking how our brands use social media in today's world with the millennials on social media and the younger generations, and how we utilize social media to reach our fans. Do you want to start that?
One thing we'll do is a contest. So if it's Halloween, the first 10 people who post a photo of their pet in a Halloween costume get a 4-jar pet set. You'll get 200 respondents. People really want to engage. They like free stuff. And also just anything nostalgic. So Father's Day, we'll have my granddad who started the company. Mother's Day, and my grandmother. Anything silly. A lot of people are just bound to a desk or their home desk and they're bored during the day. The fact that if I happen to be in Hawaii, do a store check and show our product with a pineapple on my head. Anything you can do to make them smile and relieve a little of the monotony of their day, you'd be amazed how many people will follow you and look forward to that smile.
Yeah, I would say Fletcher's is really big in social media. I'm a millennial, but I'm like an older millennial, so even I still have trouble with it and don't understand the trends, and I'm not the face talking to the camera for 8 hours a day. But we're so interactive on social media. We love resharing and talking about our fans that maybe they got a tattoo or they saw a product of us or they saw something red and yellow that made them think of us. And so we love to reshare that and engage and talk with them. I think with our brand, and probably the same, is that you want to stay true to your brand, and not everything that's happening and trendy is something that you should jump on. And so we want to know, is it part of our vision? Is it part of who we are? Is it classic? And can we participate in it in a respectful way?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't do anything political, anything divisive. There's enough people making all the commentary on social media. They don't need us to weigh in. We're just about food and family and experiences and having fun.
Yeah, we just sell food. We're not going to rallies.
We're not going to solve any problems other than your hunger.
Exactly. Well, and I do get asked a lot about the whole team ketchup, team mustard, and so I always have to talk about it. And I tell people from 1942 to 1994, ketchup was not an option for you at Fletcher's. You had to go to the burger guy across the street if you wanted ketchup. My dad said we finally introduced it when all the Yankees were moving down north, and it's sacrilegious. But I tell people that ketchup is a gateway drug, and eventually you'll become a mustard-only fan. So, but we do sell. We do go through 1,500 gallons of mustard during the 24 days of the fair and 800 gallons of ketchup. So while we love ketchup, mustard is definitely the winner in that argument.
I did want to suggest you might pour a little habanero salsa in the corn dog.
Yeah, you'll have to come out to the state fair and we'll have to do a social media collaboration.
To a pairing.
I would love to do that.
Let me have the microphone. I have another question. If this is a question for both of you, we saw these wonderful historic materials and photos and clippings that you all showed us today on PowerPoint. What are each of your companies doing to preserve the company archives, as well as your family archives, because they are certainly, obviously, very intertwined?
I've got 3 microphones. This is the first. Not be amused. Thank God for scanning technology. My dad and my aunt we're like, okay, you've given us all the old photos, right? Yeah. A year later, like, did we show you this one? Where did that come from? The minute they give me an old photo or ledgers with my grandmother's handwriting on them, I scan those things immediately. I have a historical aspect of the server. It's backed up in the cloud. You can't get rid of our history now unless you let me have a crack at it. And I'll title them, put things in the title like Mamaw in Hawaii, things like in California. But absolutely scanning. You don't need everything. Mom would try to give me his cabbage purchasing records for the 1960s. I'm like, no, I want one. I need a page. I don't need 800 of them. But it is critical, and these old photos you saw when we hired a new ad agency, they said, I want every old photo you have, because that, to millennials, it rings true if they see family. They love that instead of something flashy or me posing with Leonardo DiCaprio. That doesn't sell things. If they want grandparents and cousins and children, I don't think it does anything. It feels good. It's heavy.
It helps me, though.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to let it run.
So, it's really unfortunate, even trying to find family photos of me when I was younger, there aren't many. My mom just said, we were so busy working during the fair, we never thought to take pictures. So, there may be a picture of me at 1 or 2, and then 26, and then 30. And again, just when you're so involved in it, and I think when you're inside, you don't really see the bigger picture sometimes. And so we didn't really save a lot of that stuff. Now we have tubs full of photos and old articles that are hysterical. I saw one article that said the corny dog started in Canada, and I don't know who wrote that. I've never seen that before, but we don't release that to the public. But I am like the little family historian, and so I am hoping to, slowly as I'm going through everything, similar, just making sure things have a date and a story, because eventually I'm not gonna be here, and as we saw, the 4th generation is growing up in the business. We want them to be able to have this, and for the public one day. It's just trying to find the stories, since most of them have passed, and I was too young to really remember them, but I'm trying to collect as much as I can.
Yes, sir.
Or Amber. I have fond memories of your kiosk in the 80s, late 80s. I worked about half a block from one of them, and it was lunch at least once or twice a week. There wasn't much else good around there. Were they just not profitable, or what? Did they, they disappeared, and I'm wondering why they disappeared.
Right, so we had a lot of kiosks in the 80s and 90s, and they did disappear about 91, 92. I was born in 87, and so I've just only known what I've been told, which is that, the company maybe did grow a little too fast by having over 50 franchises. Things can get out of control, but the biggest factor that I've learned is that in the early 90s, there was an economic and an oil crisis. And again, they had to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 91, which is essentially why all of those closed down. Like I said, my mother doesn't like to talk about it much. Maybe it's kind of a sore subject, but I love to use it for new entrepreneurs, or even just people that are curious why they're not here anymore. I think they were very successful. They didn't hurt the business at the State Fair of Texas. It might have just been too much. And so that's why, my dad always encouraged us just to stick with what you're good at.
Or if it's 91, that's when I left that particular employment, so I wasn't hitting that one. That might be why the sales went down.
Your fault. Thank you for letting us play.
Thank you both.